The grand chambers of the United Nations General Assembly in New York once again became the stage for a defining diplomatic moment. On Friday, delegates from across the world voted on what has already been described as one of the most consequential resolutions in recent years, the adoption of the New York Declaration. At the heart of the declaration lies an attempt to breathe new life into the long-stalled two-state solution for Israel and Palestine. But this time, there was a decisive caveat. Hamas would not be part of it. The declaration was presented jointly by France and Saudi Arabia, reflecting a rare partnership between European diplomacy and Arab regional leadership. The results were resounding. Out of the 164 countries present, 142 voted in favour, 10 voted against, including Israel and its strongest ally, the United States, and 12 abstained. The numbers alone signalled overwhelming international support for the measure. Yet beneath the impressive majority, the resolution instantly reignited sharp divides. For Israel, the declaration was another reminder of what it perceives as the UN's bias. Since the Hamas-led attacks of October 7, 2023, Israel has accused multiple UN bodies of failing to unequivocally condemn the violence. That day, hundreds of civilians were killed, sparking the war in Gaza that has since devastated the territory and reshaped the region's geopolitics. This time, however, the declaration did explicitly address the events of that day. The General Assembly condemned the October 7th attacks carried out by Hamas against civilians and demanded the release of all hostages still held in Gaza. It was a deliberate inclusion designed to blunt one of Israel's most persistent criticisms of UN action. But the declaration went further. It asserted that Hamas must cease exercising authority over Gaza and must hand over its weapons to the Palestinian Authority. For many, this clause was the most striking. It essentially signalled the international community's unwillingness to accept Hamas as a political actor in any future Palestinian state. Instead, the focus was squarely on the Palestinian Authority. Despite its weakened standing and limited influence on the ground in Gaza, Palestinian Authority Vice President Hussein al-Sheikh quickly welcomed the declaration. For him, it was validation of years of diplomatic struggle. He called the move an important step toward ending the occupation. To Palestinian leaders in Ramallah, the UN's backing not only signalled support, but also provided new leverage in their internal political contest with Hamas. For Israel and Washington, however, the reception was starkly different. Both governments swiftly rejected the resolution, arguing that it undermined security concerns and ignored the realities of Hamas's military presence in Gaza. The timing of the vote added to its gravity. It came just days ahead of a high-level UN summit scheduled for September 22nd in New York. That summit, to be co-chaired by France, is expected to draw world leaders into a deeper discussion of the two-state solution. Several countries, including France, have already signalled they intend to formally recognise a Palestinian state during the same week. For many, Friday's declaration was therefore more than symbolic. It was a prelude to tangible diplomatic shifts. Inside the General Assembly Hall, the mood was both formal and charged. Diplomats filled the iconic chamber as the president of the session announced the adoption of the resolution. Camera shots captured the moment. Rows of seated delegates, the raising of hands, the tallying of votes, and the final pronouncement that the measure had passed. Outside, the flags of member nations waved in the New York breeze as if to underscore the international weight behind the decision. The debate around the declaration unfolded against a wider backdrop of geopolitical strain. Earlier in the week, the UN had also been forced to respond to incidents beyond the Israel-Palestine conflict. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under-Secretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, took the floor to remind delegates of the UN's role in safeguarding sovereignty. She declared, "The Secretary-General condemned this strike as a violation of Qatar's sovereignty and territorial integrity. He calls on member states to ensure respect for their obligations under international law, including the principles of the United Nations Charter. It was a pointed reminder that international law, though often tested, remains the bedrock of the institution." Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, however, was unrelenting in his criticism of the UN process. In a sharp comment delivered in Hebrew, he said, "You talk about democracy, but you speak and act exactly like fascists." For Netanyahu, the declaration's exclusion of Hamas did not outweigh what he considered to be its deeper flaws. Israel's government has long argued that international diplomacy risks rewarding Palestinian leaders while failing to address Israel's fundamental security concerns. Friday's resolution, in his view, did little to change that calculus. Yet Netanyahu's remarks also underscored a broader tension. Israel remains increasingly isolated in global forums when it comes to the Palestinian issue. Even countries traditionally cautious on recognition in Europe, Asia, and Latin America joined the majority in supporting the declaration. Washington's backing of Israel was one of the few constants, but even American diplomats acknowledged privately that the overwhelming global consensus could not be ignored. For the Arab League, Friday's outcome marked a diplomatic victory. The bloc had endorsed the declaration in July during the first part of a UN conference on the two-state solution. The text then was signed by 17 countries, laying the foundation for Friday's General Assembly vote. Saudi Arabia, in particular, invested political capital in pushing the measure forward. For Riyadh, the declaration demonstrated that it could balance its budding diplomatic ties with Israel, part of broader regional normalization efforts, while still delivering concrete political gains for Palestinians. The Palestinian Authority, for its part, now faces a delicate balancing act. While the resolution boosts its international legitimacy, it simultaneously raises expectations. Calls for governance reform, anti-corruption measures, and renewed democratic processes are bound to intensify. If Hamas is sidelined, as the declaration stipulates, then the Palestinian Authority must prove capable of filling the vacuum, a task easier said than done in Gaza, where Hamas has controlled territory since 2007. Diplomatic analysts point out that the declaration's strongest impact may not be immediate. Instead, its significance lies in shifting the diplomatic narrative. For years, the two-state solution has been dismissed by many as a fading ideal, increasingly unrealistic in the face of settlement expansion, political divisions, and recurring violence. By formally reviving the concept at the UN and by attaching conditions on Hamas's exclusion, the declaration has given the idea renewed legitimacy. Critics, however, warn that the resolution risks deepening internal Palestinian divisions. Hamas, which retains strong support in parts of Gaza, is unlikely to voluntarily cede power or disarm. Without a mechanism for enforcement, the demand that it hand weapons to the Palestinian Authority may remain purely rhetorical. Furthermore, some question whether the declaration, by so explicitly excluding Hamas, could undermine efforts to negotiate ceasefires or prisoner exchanges, where Hamas remains a key player. Still, the symbolism of the moment was undeniable. Delegates filed out of the General Assembly hall, knowing they had participated in a vote that will shape diplomatic debates for months, if not years, to come. Outside the UN headquarters, the building's glass facade reflected the New York skyline, a fitting image of diplomacy's fragile but persistent effort to mirror the aspirations of peace. In the coming weeks, attention will turn to the September 22nd summit. There, leaders from across the globe will be forced to answer pressing questions. Will more states recognize Palestine formally? How will Israel respond to growing isolation? And what role will the United States play as it navigates both alliance commitments and domestic political pressures? For now, the New York Declaration stands as the latest attempt to push the Middle East peace process forward. It is a declaration that carries hope for some, frustration for others, and uncertainty for all. What is clear is that the two-state solution, once thought buried under the rubble of war and the weight of mistrust, is back at the center of the world's diplomatic stage.
La Asamblea General de la ONU adoptó el viernes la Declaración de Nueva York, destinada a dar un nuevo impulso a la solución de dos estados para Israel y Palestina, pero que excluye inequívocamente la participación de Hamas. El texto, presentado por Francia y Arabia Saudita, fue adoptado por 142 votos a favor, 10 en contra, incluidos Israel y su aliado clave Estados Unidos, y 12 abstenciones. Israel critica desde hace casi 2 años a los organismos de las Naciones Unidas por su incapacidad para condenar el ataque de Hamas del 7 de octubre de 2023, que desencadenó la guerra en Gaza, pero la nueva declaración es clara. La Asamblea General condenó los ataques perpetrados el 7 de octubre por Hamas contra civiles y exigió que el movimiento islamista libere a todos los rehenes que siguen en su poder en Gaza. Y la declaración, respaldada por la Liga Árabe y firmada en julio por 17 países, sostiene que Hamas debe dejar de ejercer su autoridad sobre la Franja de Gaza y entregar sus armas a la autoridad palestina. El vicepresidente de la Autoridad Palestina, Hussein al-Sheikh, celebró la declaración al estimar que es un paso importante hacia el fin de la ocupación, pero Israel y Estados Unidos expresaron su rechazo. La votación precede una próxima cumbre de la ONU el 22 de septiembre en Nueva York. Varios países, entre los cuales Francia, que copresidirá la cumbre, han anunciado su intención de reconocer formalmente al Estado palestino durante la semana de la Asamblea General.